US 6 Eastern, yeah! Alright, this is going to be quite an episode. We've got the eastern half of US 6. My opinion, the less interesting half because the western half is so beautiful, but you guys were definitely way more interested in this with the requests. This should be cool stuff. US 6, one of the greats. US 6's route, it used to go all the way to Long Beach, California. It's been truncated to Bishop, California. Today, we are just talking about the portion from the Quad Cities in Illinois to its end in Provincetown, Massachusetts at the end of Cape Cod. As in the previous episode, we are only talking about eastbound. So let's pick up where we left off at the Western Eastbound US 6 video. You can check it right over there. We are on the Mississippi River crossing into Illinois on the I-74 bridge, the new bridge. As we head into the Illinois side, we see we're getting exits for I-74 and I-280. US 6 will continue straight and we are signed for Quad City Airport. The freeway ends and we hit a stoplight and we are turning left to follow US 6 and 2 US 150. Coming here, we are signed for Geneseo and the Quad City Zoo, which I remember seeing from 280 right over here a lot. Here is our entrance to the zoo, and we can see 280 and 74 right next to us. I've never been on this US 6 part to my knowledge, although I might have been on it like as an infant or something. We go under 280 and I-74. We don't have a junction with them right here. We do have a junction with I-80 right after that interchange, and we see 80 is signed west for Des Moines and east for Joliet. I know they always do that in Illinois, but I feel like signing a suburb is never the way to go. Coming off of I-80, you have a choice of Geneseo and Moline, and we are headed toward Geneseo. Here in Geneseo, we are turning left to continue on US 6 here to head to Princeton. We meet US 34, we've met that quite a bit in Nebraska, and we are meeting it again, and we are signed straight ahead for Princeton. Yet Princeton on the middle line and Mendota at the bottom line, I believe that is a US 34 city. Downtown Princeton, we split from US 34. This was requested by Mitch Campbell. He wanted to note it's where US 34 Main Street goes north from US 6 Peru Street towards I-80. And Peru Street is fitting because Peru will be the next place we'll be signed for. So thank you so much for that request. Mitch requested that with a $5 super sticker, and anybody can do that by making requests on any video. We've got some fun ones coming up. 376 in Pittsburgh and US 40 westbound Western will be coming soon. You can also make requests through our Patreon. We got a Patreon going, and you also learn about the videos before anybody else does. Get to see the videos early and make requests, so why not check it out? Leaving Princeton, we get a sign for 180 4 miles away, and Peru is 19. And here we hit the famed Illinois 180, perhaps the worst of the 180s, given that it goes to nowhere. 180 South Hennepin and 180 North signed for Interstate 80. Why not? We get to downtown Peru, Illinois, and shortly after Peru, sort of still in the Peru metro area, we are meeting I-39 and US 51, signed north for Rockford and south for Bloomington Normal. Coming off of I-39, LaSalle, Peru would be in the direction that we just came from, although LaSalle is kind of to the right as well. Ottawa toward the right, and that will be our next control city. In Ottawa, we are making a turn, and we are getting signed for Marseille, Illinois. I'm sure they probably pronounce it differently, but I'm pronouncing it the right way. I don't know. Coming out of Marseille, we now get Seneca and Morris as our control cities on Eastern US 6. We meet Illinois 47 in Morris, kind of the far western highway for Chicagoland. We are turning right here, where we will be signed for Channahon. We're meeting I-55. I-55 is correctly signed north for Chicago and signed south for Bloomington, which at these sort of intersections is fine. And if you come off I-55, US 6 itself is signed for Joliet if we turn right. We don't intersect with I-80, but we do cross under it right near this famously bad, obsolete bridge. We meet up with our old friend US 52, so turn right and we will be concurrent with US 52 for a little bit through Joliet. At Illinois 53, we are splitting with US 52 and we are heading east by turning left. US 52 is heading east by turning right. This is also old Route 66 as well. You can check out my Route 66 video right over here. We meet US 30 in downtown Joliet right near this minor league ballpark. And before too long, we split with US 30. We will go straight at this intersection with Cass Street. We're meeting the beginning of Illinois 171, which is Archer Avenue through much of the Chicagoland area. This was requested by TheDerpHog. He wanted to see this intersection because it is the route to his mom's hometown in Lamont, Illinois. So thanks so much for that request. We're meeting I-355, and it is signed South Tollway to I-80. It's not really getting a control city because it just takes you back to I-80. Joliet Joliet is often the signage here, but we just came from Joliet, so that wouldn't make sense. So a 2I-80 is probably our best option here. Coming off of 355, US 6 is signed for Joliet and New Lenox. Toward New Lenox we shall go. We are going to be turning a right for 159th Street, which is US 6's route through the south suburbs of Chicago. We're in Orland right here, straight ahead for Orland Park, the mall, that whole area. We're turning right for Tinley Park. We're meeting US 45 LaGrange Road. This is beyond where US 45 is concurrent with 12 and 20. We are south of that here because we're on 159th Street, well south of 95th Street. US 6 continues straight, and here is Illinois Route 50, Cicero Avenue, as we continue through the south suburbs of Chicagoland. Meeting I-57, I-57 South here, and 57 North ahead, and toll 294 because we have a direct interchange with that. Here's our interchange on to 294, and don't worry, I will do that road one day. I'm not sure when, but I got lots to say about the tri-state. 294 is signed south for Indiana, as it always is. And as well it should be. Coming off of 294, US 6, 159th Street is signed for Harvey and for Markham. So we were just in Markham and we are headed toward Harvey eastbound. We meet Illinois Route 1, Halsted Street here in Harvey. And now we meet I-94, the Bishop Ford or the Calumet Expressway. We continue straight past that. Once we get to Torrance, we are going to turn right. US 6 will turn off of 159th Street, saying 162nd Street here, but I think it's still 159th. And we will head toward the Borman on that. Joining I-80 and I-94 for the Kingery Expressway at this point, but it'll become the Borman once we cross Indiana. And welcome to Indiana. We get this large overhead sign because you're not going to see a small sign on the side of the road with all the trucks on the Borman. We're meeting US 41. I did a video about Northern 41. You can check that out over here. This is in Hammond, Indiana, and this was requested by Andrew DeVore because he watches Top Gear and one of the hosts is named Richard Hammond. That's a cool one. Thanks for that request. Appreciate that. I skipped ahead to where we are meeting the Borman. We've covered the Borman several times on this channel, so no need to belabor that one right now. We get US 6 east for Ripley Street and South 51. At the end of Ripley Street, we are going to be turning left to stay on US 6, and we are signed for Portage now. On Indiana Route 49, which acts as an expressway in these parts, US 6 is signed for Westville and Portage. So we're beyond Portage. Westville will be our next control city on US 6. We meet US 421, and we are concurrent with it briefly, and I'm just showing where we leave the concurrency. We are turning left, and we are signed for Walkerton now. We're going to be merging with US 35 North and concurrent with that for a little bit, and we are signed for Walkerton and Knox. Turn left for US 35 North to LaPorte, Indiana. It's hard to find this sign. It's really hidden in the trees. That's why I have this bad angle here, but we see we get a longer mileage sign now with Kendallville at 64 miles away. We meet US 31, which is a freeway in these parts, and US 31 North signed for South Bend. Continuing east, we are going to be concurrent with US 33 for a ways. US 33, if you turn left to go north, also will go to South Bend. We split with US 33 in Ligonier, Indiana here, and we also meet Indiana Highway 5. We meet I-69 pretty soon after that, and on I-69, US 6 is signed for Kendallville and Waterloo. Waterloo will become our next control city. Coming out of Waterloo, Butler will now become our only control. We just get a Butler 9. Big surprise, it's the last city before crossing a state line, so therefore it's the only thing we're signing. Weird of Indiana to be provincial in that kind of way. Indiana's usually better about that. In downtown Butler, we are getting a US 6 bar and grill, so I gotta show that. Being here on US 6, that's pretty cool. And after Butler, now we get signs for cities in Ohio because we don't have any cities left in Indiana to sign. We cross into Ohio. Looks like Ohio spent all their budget for signs on the interstate ones. We're going to be meeting US 127, signed for Bryan, north of here. This was requested by Jake Prather because Bryan is his old hometown, so he wanted to see that, and thank you so much for that request. Appreciate that. Here's the actual junction with 127, so Bryan would be turning left here. We go straight to continue down US 6. In Napoleon, Ohio, we are meeting US 24. US 24 signed west for Defiance and Fort Wayne. Could be signing Lawrence. We're joining US 24, so we are going eastbound. We're signed for Bowling Green. And taking a look back, this is actually going westbound. Jake Prather wanted me to point out in the westbound loop, US 6 is signed for Kendallville and Chicago. Cool that we are signed for Chicago here in Ohio, and thank you for that request. On the 24 and and 6 concurrency on this freeway, there used to be an at-grade railroad crossing right here. You can kind of see the divots in the road showing where it used to be, and it was taken out between 2015 and 2018. This was requested by Andrew Weishaar because he thought it was interesting how it is no longer there, which makes sense because it's kind of a freeway thing. We are now splitting with US 24, and 6 is signed east for Bowling Green, 2 424 and 110. Ohio Route 25 is our main exit for Bowling Green. This was requested by Phillip Martin because he got his undergrad at Bowling Green State University. A good buddy of mine actually went to Bowling Green as well, so right on. A cool one to talk about, and thank you for that request. I appreciate that. US 6 meets I-75 in the Bowling Green area, and on I-75, US 6 is signed for Napoleon and Fremont, so Fremont will be our next eastbound control city. We are meeting US 23, and this was requested by, I'm gonna mispronounce this one, but Chopper Chabuzada. Chopper, it's a very hard one. It's like a B and a Z. He wanted to mention this. I do apologize for butchering your name. He wanted to point this out because this is where he's from. US 23 heads to Upper Sandusky from here, which is his hometown. Thank you so much for that request. Here's another look at the US 23 intersection. So we see North 23, South 23. Adult video store here. I guess people don't have the internet in these parts. We are joining with a freeway and US 20. US 20 is signed west to Fremont and Perrysburg, and we are going to get on the Fremont bypass freeway with 20. And this iteration of the 620 concurrency, the longest and second longest roads in America, will end, but we will meet 20 again. Right now, 6 East Sandusky. We cross under the Ohio Turnpike, but we do not have an interchange with it. We're meeting Ohio too, but we are going straight. So Toledo is signed straight ahead, Cedar Point for the right, and Cleveland. We're actually heading into Sandusky proper. They don't mention that on this sign, but we do have a Sandusky welcome sign right there as well. Daniel Dobish requested that I mention anything Cedar Point related, and I've got a few Cedar Point requests, so I'll throw that one in first because here's our first sign for Cedar Point, where you turn to get there by not taking US 6, but you can get there by taking US 6 as well. So thank you so much for that request. Here at the Ohio 269 and Ohio 101 junction with US 6, we are meeting the original Margaritaville apparently. It looks a little different than the other Margaritavilles that I've seen. This was requested by CoolERoadTrips. He wanted to see this Margaritaville and access to Cedar Point, and we shall see more Cedar Point. So thank you so much for that request. This is downtown Sandusky. So Sandusky, of course, nobody comes to Sandusky for downtown. People are coming for Cedar Point. And in downtown Sandusky, we meet the beginning of US 250. Cedar Point Causeway, so turn left to get into Cedar Point. This was requested by Mark Schieg, so I appreciate that request. Thank you so much. Never been to Cedar Point, but man, it sure looks like a cool spot to go to. I really want to go there one day. It's definitely high on my list for amusement parks that I've not been to yet. FameyFamous wanted me to find a way to show Cedar Point. You couldn't really see it anywhere on US 6, so this is from turning left onto that causeway. If you drive up just a little bit, you can see it. So I will show that for this request, and we're in Sandusky, we gotta look at Cedar Point. So thank you so much for that request. Coming out of Sandusky, we are joining with Ohio 2 once again, and we are signed east for Cleveland at this point. Apparently, Ohio 2 is the one that gets the Cleveland designation because US 6 leaves Ohio 2, and now we are going to be signed for Huron. Beyond Huron, we are signed for Vermilion. Yeah, Ohio 2 actually is kind of the more major road in these parts than US 6. US 6 is kind of like that. It'll take the back way sometimes. Ian B wanted me to find a way to show Lake Erie at some point. It's hard to see Lake Erie anywhere from on US 6, but this was the only break in the trees that I could find it, so thanks for that request. Entering Lorraine Corp, always Corp in Ohio. Avon Lake, this is just off of US 6 on Miller Park Road. This was requested by Daniel Dobish. This is where they spread his grandmother's ashes in Lake Erie at this spot. So he wanted to show that, and thank you so much for that. And my condolences for your grandmother. We're getting more properly into the Cleveland metro area now. We get Alt 6 headed one direction for Detroit Road, and we'll see Detroit Road again, and we will follow 6 and 2 concurrent on Clifton Boulevard. We meet US 20 once again in the Cleveland area, so US 20 will be concurrent with us.
Cleveland.
And here we are entering Cleveland. Cleveland is good enough to put a welcome to Cleveland sign on an arterial road here. It's our first view of Cleveland skyline here.
Come and look at both of our buildings.
Come and look at both of their buildings. We're near the lake now, and East 6 and 20 are going to be leaving this going toward 25th Street. East 2 will continue along the lakeshore toward I-90. This is, believe it or not, the start of US 42, but there is no signage for it whatsoever. If you go further down that road, you can see US 42 there, but on US 6, we don't get a sign telling us that, and E and B wanted to see this intersection showing that, so thanks for that request. And also, 6 here, we are turning left onto Detroit, and there's no sign telling us to turn left for US 6, so Cleveland not doing a great job signing their US highways here. And we cross over the Cuyahoga River right here on US 6. And we're entering downtown Cleveland.
Fun times in Cleveland today.
The Chiefs are playing the Browns, so that is kind of the reason for US 6 in this part, because we're going right through Cleveland, although we don't see the stadium. Here is Tower City. This was requested by Daniel Dobish. He wanted to see that. The Jack Casino is kind of in the background there. This whole center, and you know, it's one of Cleveland's buildings, so right in the heart of downtown Cleveland. We're on a loop around Cleveland City Square, and there's no signage for US 6 there. They're not telling us which way to follow, but US 6 does go right through here.
Here's a statue of Moses Cleveland. He's the guy who invented Cleveland.
Here's Cleveland's other building, and we will be turning right, but there is no sign for US 6 telling us to do so. This is, I believe, the beginning of US 322 here in central Cleveland. It is turning right away from us, and we're going to be meeting I-90, so we get East I-90 to Ohio 2. So Ohio really puts a lot of prominence in Ohio 2. Probably should have just done that. That'd be a whole lot easier than doing Eastern US 6. This is MLK Drive in Eastern Cleveland. US 6 is on this old viaduct over the road here. This was requested by Daniel Dobish because he would take MLK to see his brother at the VA hospital nearby. So thank you so much for that request. He says it's a great part of the city. Looks lovely, lovely looking old architecture there. Here's the intersection with US 6 and Lakeview and 123rd Street. They both jut out to the left here. This was requested by Roadrunner because he grew up on 123rd Street and he always thought this was kind of a random intersection. Thank you so much for that request. All right, we're getting a US 6 veer left because we are joining up with US 20 once again. Euclid, Ohio. Here in Euclid, US 20 and US 6 are going to split, and this is the last time they will split. They will not meet again further east. So two grade highways split for the last time. This was requested by Roadrunner because he went to Euclid Central Middle School just near here, although he says it no longer exists. Thank you for that request. Right here, we cross over I-271, and once we leave Euclid and the Cleveland metro, immediate metro area, Chardon is the next main city we're signed for, and here we are there. We're now going to be signed for Andover, turn right. Here is downtown Andover, and you see that US 6 heads to the right from here to continue east. Connie Lake, Pennsylvania is going to be our next place we're going to be heading, and that is to the right. And welcome to Pennsylvania. I wonder if we'll have some provincial control cities on a back road like US 6. We would expect to have provincial control cities on a back road like US 6, but I'm guessing Pennsylvania might take it to another level. As we enter Pennsylvania, we are getting a Grand Army of the Republic Highway sign. To be fair, that is US 6's name throughout its entirety, from Bishop all the way to Provincetown. For reference, we are in very rural northern Pennsylvania here. We're north of I-80 throughout the entirety of this route through Pennsylvania, south of southern New York's I-86. Linesville is the first town we're in, and we get Conneaut Lake for our first control city as we turn right on East 6. In Conneaut Lake, we are meeting with US 322. US 322 is west to the right and east forward, and we're merging with it, but we don't get a sign for US 6. Weird, we get 322, but 6 is the more important one. They don't mention that. 6 is straight ahead as well. And we do see 6 and 322 are signed together eastbound, and Meadville will be our next control city, 5 miles away. For this part of Pennsylvania, Meadville is a pretty big spot, so the short distance is no problem. Before we get to Meadville, we meet southbound US 19, and US 19 will head off in that direction. We will become concurrent with northbound US 19. In fact, we see here our three-way concurrency will continue north US 19, east US 6, and 322. We meet I-79 as this triplex, and I-79 is smartly signed for Erie and Pittsburgh because this is the part of PA that actually does decent signage on interstates. We enter Meadville, and 322 will leave us. This was requested by Mark Schieg. He wanted to point out 6, 19, and 322 are all together for a little while, and there's a whole lot of miles between these three roads. Thank you so much for that request. Further down in Meadville, US 19 and US 6 will separate, and we see that there is a 6N over there as well that we haven't really paid attention to. As we turn right, we see that Corey will be our control city. Edwin Paschke requested seeing Corey, Pennsylvania, because his dad sold peaches there. So thank you so much for that request. That's pretty cool. Coming out of Corey, Youngsville and Warren will be our next control cities, and neither of those are too far away either. On the Youngsville bypass, we meet Railroad Street. Railroad Street and US 6 was requested by 14 Rocket, so thank you so much for that request. Appreciate that. US 62 South signed for Teodet and Tionesta. This was requested by TheDerpHog. He talked about those quite a bit on his US 62 video and how hilariously bad those are signed because there is less than 1,000 people between those two cities, and there's definitely better places that PennDOT could be signing here. But PennDOT, what are you going to expect? So thanks so much for that request. That's a fun one. US 62 will become concurrent with us northbound as we head east for Warren. In Warren, US 62 North, Ludlow Street is the business district. 6 will continue around Warren though. This is Business 6 going through downtown Warren, and Hickory Street and US 6 is the heart of downtown. This was requested by 14 Rocket, and he also wanted to point out the Flatiron building. I'm assuming that is the building in the background that kind of looks like the Flatiron building in New York City, only much shorter. Thank you so much for that request. Coming out of Warren, we are splitting with US 62, and Sheffield will become our control city. Sheffield is where Pennsylvania 666 ends. East 6 is signed for Kane. Kane, 17 miles away from this point. Here is downtown Kane, Pennsylvania. It's pretty cool looking, old architecture here. This was requested by Edwin Paschke because it is his brother-in-law's childhood home. Looks like a good spot. Still got a Radio Shack there, I see. I thought those were all gone. This is only 2 months ago, and thank you for that request. In Lance Corners, we are meeting US 219, and we are now signed for Mount Jewett, 3 miles away. It's not too far. PA signs such small cities and in such small increments, I'll skip ahead to Smethport. Here is downtown Smethport, and Smethport was requested by Edwin Paschke because it is his Aunt Shirley's childhood home. So thank you so much for that request. And yeah, I like all the brick. It's kind of cool, northern PA. In Smethport, our bottom line city is Cootersport. Cootersport. I'm probably saying it wrong though. In Cootersport, 6 is going to turn right and be signed for Wellsboro, 45 miles away. That's a pretty good distance of a control city for PA. Jersey Shore. It's way more than 73 miles to the Jersey Shore. In Wellsboro, we are turning left and we are going to be signed for Mansfield, 13 miles away. In Mansfield, we meet US 15, and this is future I-99. Coming out of Mansfield, now we are assigned for Troy and Towanda. Speaking of I-99, now we're meeting US 220, which is the original route for much of I-99. In Towanda, we're going to be turning left, and we're going to be signed for Weishaar, 2 miles away. I'm not sure how to say that. I feel like it's the fast way of talking about the White Sox. Hey, you see the White Sox? We are crossing the Susquehanna River, and in Weishaar, we are signed for Weil Using? Something like that? I don't know how they're coming up with these names in Pennsylvania. These are crazy city names. We are going to be signed for Laceyville next, 7 miles away. So yeah, a whole lot of small places that I've certainly never heard of. But northern Pennsylvania is not that well known of a place, and US 6 goes through some pretty sparse regions quite far away from the bigger cities of Pennsylvania. In Laceyville, we're now going to be signed for Meschapin, 7 miles away. Never too long of a distance here. And in Meschapin, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, we are signed for another small town 9 miles away from here. We meet Business 6 East and Bypass 6 East, but which one's the real US 6? I'm not sure, but East Bypass is going to Scranton. I've heard of Scranton, so that's what we're going to follow. On the way to Scranton, we meet US 11, and US 11 is signed south with us concurrently, and north US 11 you head off. 6 and 11 come on under this towering bridge of the end of I-476 in the Scranton area here, and we're going to end up dealing with that road in just a minute. So we're getting 81 and East 6 and South 476 for Binghamton and Wilkes-Barre. Lots of stuff going on here. 476 is part of the Pennsylvania Turnpike system, of course. It's the Northeast Extension, and we're not getting on that. We are joining with I-81 for Binghamton and Wilkes-Barre. And then we get our choice of North 81, South 81, and we want South 81 for Wilkes-Barre. We get an exit for Business 6 not far on to I-81 for Dixon City. 81 signed south for Wilkes-Barre. We are getting US 6 and I-84 and South 380 for Carbondale and Mount Pocono. A pretty big interchange here with all three roads having kind of different routes. We see once we've gotten into the distributor lane, you have a choice to stay on 81 south, or you can continue toward 6, 84, and 380. 84 and 380 are going one way. 6 east is leaving all this mess, headed toward Carbondale on its own. This is exit 6 for Meredith Street, Carbondale and Childs. Exit 6, US 6 is on its own here. There's no way it's 6 miles or 6 ordinal numbers away from anything. Where are they getting this number? In Carbondale, we are getting Honesdale as US 6's next control city. Here is Honesdale and lovely fall foliage right here, and we are going to be turning right, and we will be signed for Hawley. Pretty nice here, this Honesdale here. This is a pretty nice looking spot. And here's another look at downtown Honesdale. Yeah, there's some really nice looking cities along US 6 in Pennsylvania, I'll say that. And here is Hawley. Hawley looks lovely as well. Yeah, there's some really nice looking small towns here, I gotta say. We're going to be signed for Milford now. Milford a little distant at 23 miles away, and also we're signed for it because it's the last city in Pennsylvania for the most part. We're meeting 209 and 206, and we are going to be signed for Matamoros. So yeah, I guess there is another city we could sign in Pennsylvania. So we got Matamoros 6 and Stroudsburg 34 straight ahead. Yeah, PA doing anything they can do to sign PA with the border towns. 6 and 209 are headed together here eastbound, and I-84 is just to our left. Here's an entrance onto I-84, and now we get into Matamoros. So, I don't know, did they name it after the Mexican border town for being a border town? Here's our bridge over the Delaware River, a rare free bridge over the Delaware. Almost all of them have tolls, and this was requested by P. Barry 1988. He wanted to say his grandparents live a few blocks away, used to walk on this bridge. He's walked on this bridge a few times to New York. So thanks so much for that request. Appreciate that. And we get a complicated no parking anytime here, this time, so that works as welcome to New York. We are in Port Jervis, New York right now, so we get a nice Port Jervis sign. We've got a low railroad bridge coming up, 12'8", but then underneath it, it says actual bridge height is 13 foot 8 inches. Patrick Gast wanted me to show that, so thank you so much for that request. That's a fun one. We are splitting with Route 209. 209 north is to the left, and 6 continues straight for eastbound 6. We're meeting New York routes 42 and 97, and Patrick Gast wanted me to show this as well because he takes 97 to get to camp twice a year. So thank you so much for that request. We, on the other hand, are turning right away from both of those. tysontransitcam wanted me to show the Tri-State Monument under I-84. You can get to it by going through the Laurel Grove Cemetery. So here is the monument, and thank you for that request. Nano also wanted me to show you the tri-state marker, so here's a different angle of it. Here is the Delaware River and the marker and I-84 bridge right over there. Thank you so much for that request. We're meeting I-84 again. We're kind of hanging out with I-84 for this part of the country, and Scranton is on I-84 west 57 miles. So as you can see, coming out of Port Jervis, we're pretty close to I-84, so the control cities on 6 don't really matter that much. They're just going to be small towns. Through traffic would be on I-84. At our intersection with I-84, Goshen is going to be our next control city. There's a Legoland, it looks like there, but you can't see it well from the road, so I didn't show it. But coming out of Goshen, it looks like our next control city is going to be Chester, as we are going to be turning left to continue on US 6. US 6 becomes a freeway in these parts, and here's our exit for 94 for Chester and Florida. US 6 is now going to exit itself as this road we're on is going to become a route to I-87 and the New York State Thruway. So 6 will be signed for Bear Mountain. New York Route 293 heads to West Point, 11 miles away. Yankees 107 wanted me to point that out, so thank you for that request. That is the route to West Point. We are heading toward Peekskill. We're following 6 for Bear Mountain State Park and the Palisades Interstate Parkway, and to the Bear Mountain Bridge. So now we are on the Palisades Interstate Parkway, and the Bear Mountain Bridge exit is going to be coming soon. We are meeting US 9W, which is signed north for West Point. We are also going to be taking 6 and 202 toward the Bear Mountain Bridge. And we see at this roundabout, East 6 and East 202 head off for the Bear Mountain Bridge and Peekskill on the other side of the Hudson River. This is a toll bridge over the Hudson. Here's a look at the Bear Mountain Bridge. It is a really cool one. This was requested by Yankees 107 because of the beautiful scenery, and I agree, this is a lovely bridge. Thank you so much for that request. And our next shot is of the Bear Mountain Bridge, and this was our opening shot as well, so that is a cool bridge over the Hudson River. On the other side of the river, we are getting 6 and 202 for Peekskill, turn right. 6 exits itself once again, and we are going to be on Main Street for Peekskill. 202 is going to be leaving us, and they don't tell us this, but US 6 will go straight. We are in Mohegan Lake, New York, and this was requested by BobWhit. His school bus route when he was a kid went right through Mohegan Lake right over here on US 6, and he says he used to tell his parents that US 6 goes all the way to California, but they didn't believe him. Well, I'm here to tell you, you were right. Thanks so much for that request. Outside of Mohegan Lake, we are meeting the Taconic State Parkway. We're all kind of in the New York City area. That's why there's so many parkways. We're kind of in the far northern suburbs of the city here. On the Taconic State Parkway, US 6 is signed for Mahopac, and Mahopac becomes our new eastbound control city. Here in Mahopac, we are going to turn right for Brewster. Brewster, 5 miles away from here. We meet US 202 once again in Brewster, and we are going to be turning left and becoming concurrent once more, and we are now signed for Danbury, so that's in Connecticut. We're almost out of New York. We've got an exit for I-84 and I-684, but we shall continue straight along with US 202. Danbury's signed for that because it's faster to take I-84 to Danbury, but we'll get there as well on US 6. And welcome to Connecticut. We see Danbury city limit as soon as we cross the state line. We meet I-84 and US 7 here. West 84 signed for Newburgh, and we are going to be joining with East 84 along with 202. North 7 and East 202 are going to leave us for Brookfield and New Milford. We get East 84 for Waterbury, and for whatever reason, US 6 is not signed here, although the other US routes are. Maybe because we're still concurrent with 84. We leave I-84 at exit 8. We are signed on Newtown Road for Bethel, and we'll also go to Newtown. We are in Newtown, Connecticut. We're going to be turning left. Of course, a city with a sad history. Unfortunately, we pass through all too many cities like that in this channel. This is the Blue Colony Diner in Newtown, and this was requested by tysontransitcam because he had lunch here with his grandmother and great-grandmother a few years ago. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that request. We meet I-84 once again, and we are going to be rejoining I-84, and it is signed for Waterbury. At exit 15, we leave I-84 once again, and we are now signed for Southbury. A whole lot of berries out here. We got Danbury and Waterbury and Southbury, and we're going to have more on US 6. And in fact, yes, we are going to be signed left for Woodbury and Roxbury. We're on Watertown Road, and we are going to be turning right for Waterbury. We're meeting State Route 8, which is a freeway, and it is signed for Torrington. We will be concurrent with that briefly. And just a couple miles up the road after being concurrent with 8, we are leaving with Connecticut 222 for Thomaston and Bristol. So Bristol becomes our new control city. Here we are in Bristol, home of the worldwide leader. We are not anywhere near the ESPN campus though, so I am not showing that. We've snaked our way back to being right next to I-84 again, and we are going to be rejoining that. We hitch a ride on I-84 through Hartford, but I'm not going to cover that since I've covered that in an I-84 video. We are leaving with US 44, the Middle Turnpike West for Manchester. At the end of 384, we get 6 and 44 East for Mansfield and Providence, so Providence shows up for the first time. Here in Manchester, Connecticut, 44 and 6 are splitting. This was requested by Boss King Inc. because he always felt like 44 was kind of a weird designation for a road in this part of the country, and I gotta say I agree, and thank you so much for that request. 6's expressway ends once again, and we are going to be turning right here and sign for Providence. We're meeting I-395, which is signed south for Norwich, and it looks like north it's not signed for anything. And right after passing 395, we get into Rhode Island. So we haven't spent much time in Rhode Island on this channel. Good to be back. In Rhode Island, US 6 assigned Providence eastbound and Connecticut westbound. We're going to be joining with I-295 assigned for Providence and Warwick. We're on 295 south briefly, and then we get a freeway of our own, 6 East Providence, as US 6 is the major east-west freeway in Providence. This is what it looks like on US 6 as we head into Providence. Memorial Boulevard and downtown is an exit only as we approach the center of the city. This is also our unsigned meeting with US 1. US 1, to get to there, you would follow this exit as well. And this exit was requested by New York Rambler. Thanks so much for that. New York Rambler also wanted me to show this branch of Fire and Ice, which is right underneath that interchange. Although it no longer exists, it was a place that he really loved to go have some food. So thanks so much for that request. As for 6 itself, it is going to be joining I-95 south and heading toward 195. 6 and 195 are going to leave right after that, and it is signed for East Providence and Cape Cod, Mass. The end is in sight now, our first indication of our actual end. We cross the Providence River, and we have a pretty good view of downtown Providence as we cross here. After being concurrent with 195 for a short amount of time, 6 to 1A and 114 Pawtucket Avenue and Seekonk, Mass. coming up soon. Here is our actual exit for US 6. We're right next to 195, and we are entering Seekonk, and that is also the indication we are entering Massachusetts, our final state. As I said, 195 very nearby. 195 is signed for Fall River and Cape Cod. US 6 is the local road for 195 around here, so we are signed for Swansea now. 6 becomes a freeway once again, or at least an expressway, so Fall River is our control city. Further down that ramp we see 6 East Fall River, and Fall River is a somewhat major city in this part of Massachusetts. 195 is never too far away. That is 195 just to the left of us. At Massachusetts 88, we are now signed 6 East for Dartmouth. Thought that was in New Hampshire. And we're getting to areas in Massachusetts where I am certainly not going to attempt to pronounce place names, but 6 continues east. And then next up, 6 is going to be east signed for Buzzards Bay. In Buzzards Bay, we are meeting Route 28, and we are signed for Falmouth and Hyannis. We go right under the Bourne Bridge, which is one of the routes to Cape Cod. We will be taking the other route. Here's our junction with Massachusetts 3. It's signed for Boston. It also goes to Plymouth. The DerpHog wanted to point that out because of Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims and all that. Thank you for that request. Daniel Dobish actually had a request for this same interchange because of the other part of it, 626A for Hyannis, heading to the Sagamore Bridge. This is where you officially enter the Cape, and he wanted to mention it because a buddy used to live right over the bridge by Otis Air Force Base, and it was the best Super Bowl party he ever attended down there, the Packers-Patriots Super Bowl, with a hot tub and 20-degree weather and plenty of adult beverages, so sounds like a cool party. And thank you so much for that request. This is the same interchange looking from the other direction, and this was requested by Edward Rasmussen. We see Plymouth is on the sign headed this way, and Plymouth is Edward's hometown. Thank you so much for that. And he also wanted to note that this used to be a rotary, and they've switched it to a flyover because there was so much traffic. Here is the actual Sagamore Bridge. This will take us over to Cape Cod officially. 6A leaves us and heads to Sagamore, and 6 East is now signed for Hyannis and Provincetown. So I believe this is our first mention of Provincetown since when we were in Bishop, California. Exit 63 was requested by Pat because this was his childhood home. Chase Road for East Sandwich and South Sandwich. Getting kinda hungry, and thank you so much for that request. Hyannis was one of the major places signed so far, so here is our exit for Hyannis. At that exit, US 6 is now signed for Orleans and Provincetown. Exit 78A was requested by Mo Cowan because a friend won a silent auction for a beach house off of that exit, and he got stuck in traffic 24 hours later trying to evacuate Hurricane Irene, so that's unfortunate. But he did get to see Provincetown, and it was good times. Interesting story. Thanks so much for that request. 6A was with us. I guess 6A must be related to 6, and it is for Orleans and East Brewster, and we're on a Super 2 kind of freeway now. So since Orleans was our control city before, we are now signed 6 East for Eastham and Provincetown. Highland Road is our exit for the Cape Cod Light, And we finally get a bit of coastal as we continue along this winding road toward Provincetown. We are meeting the route into downtown Provincetown, so our control city goes beyond our last control city, beyond Provincetown. We are now east for Herring Cove Beach. And it looks like we've run out of green signs coming this far, and we are getting Provincetown signs straight ahead, Herring Cove Beach to the right, and Race Point. This is the very end of US 6, so we made it this far, and then the ocean is blocked by trees. Let's look beyond the trees, let's look at the Atlantic Ocean, since we have made it all the way here. Alright. Whew, alright, let's take a look at Todd's the way it should be for US 6. Eastbound, I'm going to say a whole lot of places. We'll start with these, which are all in Illinois for the most part. I did list a lot of Chicago suburbs because it's, one to the other, and they're bigger cities than a lot of these smaller places we pass through later. Then I would say these cities, I'm not going to read all of them, but you can pause and take a look. And finally, these cities, I would definitely delete some of the cities that Pennsylvania is using and try and focus on the ones that are more important for long distance travel on US 6. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Control City Freak. This was a lot of fun. We'll look at Westbound maybe in a couple of years. Next week, we will be looking at 610 in Houston. I'm sure requests are closed for that by now, and 376 in Pittsburgh shortly thereafter. Until next time, though, my name is Todd, and keep on trucking.